After 30 years of investigating and writing about food, I was just so excited to read about the Nourishment Table. It just instantly caught my imagination as just a very good way of describing how we should eat. And I'm really delighted to be able to come to Oslo to meet Marit, who has just looked into what we mean by processed and ultra-processed and broken this down into a way that's really going to take us forward. Marit, what do you mean when you talk about processed food and ultra-processed food? What's the difference?
Yeah, so this new discussion on ultra-processed foods, it's not about processing per se. We humans have always been processing our foods and used simple techniques to preserve foods, to prepare meals and to maintain the quality of foods out of season, for instance. That in itself is not a problem. That's part of the solution, actually. So, but what this new research has identified is that when you add an extra level of processing, that's done exclusively by the food industry. Well, that sort of extra processing is not beneficial for the consumer. That's only beneficial for the industry to create larger profits.
So could you give me an example of what you would consider to be a benign form of processing and the difference between that and this ultra-processed food that we see all around us?
Yeah, for instance, take rolled oats. They're minimally processed, to inactivate some enzymes and make sure the quality stays high and they're ready to eat. But then you can process oats into something like Cheerios or something similar with that puffy, crispy structure, and then you will add flavorings to that, like sugars and other aromas maybe, and then you create a very new product. It's highly profitable and very different from the original food.
So basically what you're doing in kind of ultra processing is you're taking a natural food apart, reassembling it into components, adding a lot of additives and probably using processing aids and all sorts of processing methods, from heat, extreme, enzyme treatment, and all sorts of methods to make it something which appeals to people but is actually less nourishing.
Yeah, exactly. And some of these products are totally made of from ingredients like starches and oils and flavorings and additives, but other could be made from real foods, from whole foods, but that are processed in a way to make them more appealing and to make them more palatable and to increase the liking, so that we will prefer these foods over the whole foods. So that's the point of doing that extra processing.
Yeah.
The purpose is to sort of displace those whole foods and make sure we buy the ultra processed foods instead, because they're more profitable for the food industry.
So it's a way of adding value, isn't it, to cheap food ingredients? So many processed foods, they're not starting off with the very, or I should say ultra-processed foods, they're not starting off with great quality ingredients. They're often just a starch, a grain, something that's not necessarily very nourishing, and then transforming that to make it in quite a kind of addictive but quite profitable form to sell and to be instantly edible. Is that not something that's quite important, that there's no effort involved with it? You just eat it maybe on the move, or you don't have to cook any longer, you just buy this, heat it up.
That's right. So these ultra processed foods, they are ready to eat or ready to heat, so you can they're very convenient, and there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with convenient foods. We have fresh fruits. They are ready to eat,
really?
And that's convenient as well,
yeah.
Or nuts or whatever. So there are actually loads of whole foods that you can eat on the go and without any cooking. Nothing wrong with that, and nothing wrong with earning money on creating food products.
Yeah.
So that's not the problem. The problem is that extra level of processing turns out to be a problem for the human biology. So these techniques and the ways that these foods are are changed actually make the foods less nourishing, and they seem to mess up with our evolutionary systems for staying healthy, really.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that we've learned now from research is that there are a lot of associations between high consumption of ultra-processed food and poor health, you know, illness and obesity. And, you know, what do you think could be some of the ways that the ultra-processed food is undermining health? I mean, what would be some of the ways that it would do that? You talk first of all about the loss of nutrients, but also the additional technological input there. Can you explain to me a little bit more about that?
One of the problems is that these ultra-processed foods are less nourishing. We know that. We have very good data supporting that. They have less vitamins and minerals than whole foods or diets made from whole foods. But they also have less of these protective components like the antioxidants or phytochemicals or fiber, for instance. So you actually do two things. You know, when you eat those whole foods, you will have all these compounds in the foods.
Marit, how do you define ultra-processed food? What is that?
Yeah, so the actual definition, that's quite complicated, and you know, this is part of a research framework, and we don't expect consumers to know about this framework, and that's not necessary either. So what you could use as a simple guidance, you know, when doing your shopping and cooking and preparing meals, is to ask, what's the whole food version? What do I really want to eat? Do I want to eat oats? Then buy the rolled oats instead of those colorful boxes with cartoons on them that have added sugars and different kinds of flavorings and stuff that make us eat more of that less nutritious food. And you can do the same comparison with lots of different food groups. If you want to eat fish, then eat the fish fillet and not something that's breaded and fried. If you want potatoes, then have potatoes and bake them in the oven instead of having French fries, industrially made French fries, for instance. If you want veggies, then eat veggies instead of those crunchy veggie sticks that are targeted towards children, for instance. So, and if you want to quench your thirst, have some water instead of soda.
For about 30 years, we've had the hunch that a diet of ultra-processed food wasn't going to do us any good, and it's been so exciting here in Oslo to catch up with the science and this really good evidence we have now which shows that hunch is very much correct. And what I feel now is a great lifting of a block, whereas before we were always, discussions about food were always bogged down in negativity. We now have a positive vision of how we can eat well and healthily and pleasurably, yet integrate that with busy modern lives.